Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of In the Meantime. This one's a special episode. This is me working with a conference called Reignite, which takes place up in Muskoka. And this is a neat conference. It's a bunch of like entrepreneurs and whatnot, and they meet at like a camp, a kids camp. And I've been the artist in residence. This is now my second year being the artist in residence. This year what I did as one of my art projects for it was actually create one of my concert posters. And so this is the whole process of me making that poster. Let's check out how I did it. So when I do one of these posters, what I like to do is start with an image and a font. A lot of the times when I do it for bands, I start with fonts and I draw them all by hand. But luckily, this conference has already got their own set font and everything. And what I have to do is I want to prepare this to go onto a silk screen. In order to do this, I actually have to work with a pen and ink or a brush and ink on film. And what I do is I start with just sort of doing the curves and whatnot, and then I actually take a ruler and I start to lay out all the proper straight lines. Once I have the outline done of the font, what I do is I actually fill it in with the ink. And I do this for all the fonts. I've done it for the logo, and then I did it for the dates and also the place and whatnot. Then I also did a very quick outline of the logo itself, the one that it's fire and stars, because I'm going to be using that as well. Since this conference happens up north, I thought it was very important to do an image of a canoe. I thought it just ties in well with the Muskokas. People associate canoeing with the landscape that is up there. And so when you see me doing the canoe, I start with the outline once again, and then I get into the details like the mesh that people sit on when you're in the canoe. Once I've done all the details, I start with a technique called cross-hatching. Cross-hatching is actually how you add tone and shading to an object. So you'll see that when I do the cross-hatching on the canoe, it starts to add real depth. The next thing I draw is the landscape. And this landscape is actually at the camp. It's one of the scenes that you see when you're looking out around the cabins. And so I thought it was a great reference. Once again, what I do is I start with the treetop outline, and then I block in all the shadows with my ink. And I try just to block in the shadows. I don't do a lot of cross-hatching when it comes to the trees. The next thing is the big thing, the silk screen, putting the image into the silk screen. The first thing I need to do is I need to coat my silk screen, and I coat it in something called photoemulsion. And photoemulsion is a light-sensitive chemical. So I coat the screen and I wait for it to dry. Once it's dry, I then take all my drawings that I've done on the film and I tape them down to the screen, and I put them face down on my light table, and I expose the drawings in the silk screen to the light. And this allows me to what's called burn the image into a silk screen. Once I've got it off the light table, I submerge it in water and I hose it down. Now, what I do while I'm waiting for the photoemulsion to dry is I actually prep the paper. Now, for this print edition, normally I'm used to doing small print editions for bands like 30, 40, tops maybe 50. This one, I had to do 180 prints. So I actually had to get 90 feet of vintage wallpaper prepped for this print. So you'll see me roll it out, and then I use something called gesso. It's actually, gesso is a primer, and I mix it with something called clear gesso, and I coat the whole entire wallpaper, every roll of that wallpaper in that mixture. And what it does is it gives it a bit of distance. So when I print on top of it, the print is more dominant and more there. If I just print it on the wallpaper, it gets mixed up with the background of the wallpaper. Now, the next thing I need to do with the wallpaper is cut it. When I cut the paper, I have the rolls all stretched out. I am at a table, and what I do is I sort of take the paper up, I measure it, cut it, move it, and I do this over and over and over and over. And with this, I actually had to do two different types of cuts with the wallpaper. I first had to cut lengths, so they were in strips, and then I had to take all those strips and cut them in half. Now comes the real fun part, the actual silk screening. What I first have to do is I have to register the paper because I want to have the image in the same place on the paper for the entire print. I do this with masking tape, and then I start with the colors. I have to work from the background up. So the first colors I started with were like a fluorescent orange for the canoe, and I did like a very vibrant green for the landscape. And I'm printing two colors at the same time. So the next colors I did was the green for the canoe. Then I did the yellow logo and the blue font. Then I went into the black landscape. I did the black of the canoes, and finally the black of the logo and the font, the actual title, Reignite. The last thing I have to do is sign and number the prints. But before I sign and number them, I actually add another coat of clear gesso where I'm going to sign and number it. And what this does is it allows me to use the marker and it doesn't wear the markers out that much, right? And then once I have the clear gesso on there, the next thing I do is the numbering. Now, when you see the number, it looks like a fraction. What that is it tells people how many are out there and the number of that edition that they received. And the top number is the number in which it was signed. So the one you're seeing was the first one out of the 160 that I signed. That's why it says 1/160. What you're seeing here is the final piece that will be handed out to all the attendees of the Reignite conference. I'm very happy with this piece. I love the colors, and I'm hoping that all the attendees are happy with it, and I hope you guys like it. So the last thing I want to do is thank the people that are involved with this. The first person I want to thank is Chris Adams, the man that this is his brainchild, Reignite. He's an excellent guy, and he's also someone I work on with many other art projects. So thanks a lot, Chris Adams, for letting me partake in this. Second people I want to thank is actually a person, and it's Carter from Big Influence Marketing. He's the one who's making this editing happen. He's the one who's putting this all together and making it into a work of art for me. And the last person I want to thank is my youngest daughter, Ella. Ella was my clean hands, my assistant. You'll see sometimes maybe her arms reaching in there, and we worked on this print for 2 weeks together. But it was a great time, and I loved working with her. Of course I love her. She's my kid. Thanks again, everyone, for watching this episode. And I hope you come back and hit the subscribe button so you can check out more videos.